The Duren property has evolved over time from when purchased as a source of timber in the early 1900s, then a quintessential Midwest dairy farm carved out of the terrain that operated until 1988, and now as a conservation-based legacy property. Doug's conservation motto is, "It's not just ours, it's just our turn," which embodies the idea that we learn from and honor the work of those who came before us, and as we plan and act in present to conserve the resources for the future. That ethic is also the basis for Duren's current project, Sharing the Land, which is the theme of his talk here at Pheasant Fest. Sharing the Land is a conservation cooperators network that connects landowners with hunters and access seekers for the purpose of stewarding and enjoying healthier lands together. Please help me welcome Doug Duren to the stage.
Okay. You said we'll try to. Yeah, I'll need it. If that's the, I'll give you that in case I. Is it on? All right. No, that's good. Thank you. I'm going to try to stay behind the podium here rather than pacing back and forth like a moving target at a turkey shoot or something. Tough act to follow. My friend Ryan Callahan and all those folks from various organizations that are doing so much for public and private land. So what I came to talk to you today about is this project that we're doing, the proof of concept right now on my farm in southwest Wisconsin. How many of you are landowners? So we've got a few landowners. That's really important. And it's really interesting to me as we start thinking about the future of private land and the future of hunting and the future of conservation. One of the things that I'm most concerned about is that the conservation message is continuing to be spread to people who aren't necessarily landowners. When I was a young man, I could tell you the first person in my area who bought their property only for conservation or recreation purposes. His name was Hans Morsbach. He was from Milwaukee, so I'm from southwest Wisconsin. Milwaukee's on the other side of the state. Hans Morsbach, he was from Milwaukee, and he drove a brand new Mercedes-Benz. And to a 12-year-old kid from Cazenovia, the Mercedes-Benz looked like a spaceship. 50 years later, you can do the math real quick and figure out how old I am. 50 years later, that property is still owned by his family. What was interesting about what happened there at the Morsbach land was he bought a kind of a rundown piece of property. I think it's 160 acres. It was 120, well, anyway, 160 acres. And it was kind of a rundown farm that I don't know if he bought it because it was in tax arrears or what, but this is, somebody do the math, 1972, I guess. And you could buy a heck of a lot of land for a little bit of money back in those days. And our area was very much the way this place looks. This is our farm on the screen. Sort of that quintessential dairy farm with, the red barn and the white milk house, and we milk 40 cows. In my area, there's still as many cows as there were when I was in. Our landscape was dotted with these 40 cows, 50 cow herds, and there's still as many cows in our area right now, milk cows. They all happen to be on one property. It's a change in the dairy industry. It's a change in farming that I'm sure that most of you can understand. And I'm not here to bemoan that. There's benefits and there's benefits to that. There's downsides to that, but we have to keep all of that kind of thing in mind. The other thing I would tell you about Mr. Morsbach, and he's since passed, so I'm not going to speak ill of him. But is that the first thing he did when he bought that property is he put no trespassing signs all the way around it, which was something you didn't see 50 years ago in my area. I mean, you knew everybody, every farm you knew around the landscape. You knew all the families. If that family needed some help, you gave them some help with haying or whatever. And so when it came time for hunting or mushroom picking or doing whatever, it wasn't really a question as to whether it was okay for you to do that. You could just go ahead and do it. He put those no trespassing signs up, and it was really kind of shocking to see because it was right next to a place where friends of mine lived, and we squirrel hunted that whole ridge line and used to go through that property at all. And then you run into these and it's like you have to stop. The funny story, at least I think, is it kind of goes along with that, is that in the middle of the summer, two friends of mine and I, 12 years old, riding our bicycles, we ride our bicycles up to this spot where you could open up, you know, that wire fence with the post, and you could leave your bicycles there, walk down and access a trout stream right there. And Charlie Green, the guy who owned the property, was super cool with that as long as you made sure that, you know, leave the fence the way you found it, leave the gate the way you found it. So we pull up there one day on our bicycles, Marty Klein, Tim Hanko, and I can't make these names up. And we ride up there on our bicycles, got our fishing poles along with us, and we're about to walk in there. On that sign, on that fence, was a sign the same size as a no trespassing sign that read the following way: if your land is posted, stay the hell off of mine. And we all were farm kids, and we all had farms, and so we're looking at each other like, I mean, you guys? And what we realized is that that guy, Hans Morsbach, who had posted his land, had also been accessing the trout stream right there and planting, you know, parking his spaceship, his Mercedes right there. So old Charlie Green, the guy who owned the property, was returning the favor. It's just that, and I remember kind of bemoaning that as that happened. Over time, absentee owners have become, in our area, southwest Wisconsin again, 65% of the owners of the land. It's absentee owners, people who don't live there. Farming has changed, land ownership has changed. The landscape has become a little bit parcelized, and our habitat has been changed as well. And not all for the good, not all for the bad. It's just kind of the way it is. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about our farm. If I can make this thing move. So this is our farm, again, sort of a very typical southwest Wisconsin. I realize that 400 acres out here in this part of the world isn't a whole lot. But you can look at this pretty quickly, everything inside the yellow line there. And you can probably figure out where the fields are and why they're there, and where the woods is and why they're there. All those contour strips, you know, nice fields, long, garden plot type farmland. The woodland, the reason there's so much woodland on our farm is my great-grandfather had a sawmill, as did my grandfather. So this land was purchased by them for the timber. The buildings are right here. We had pasture in the bottoms, crops here. This is actually some CRP that crops were planted on, crops in the bottom, and this was obviously a big part of the woodland. Incidentally, this up here was a shelterwood harvest we did on on the oaks, and I like to say that I cut my great-grandfather's trees when we did that. 125 years old, 25-year-old oaks. And when we did that, we did it in such a way that 100 years from now there will be oaks there again. And there's a lot of work that goes along with that. If you've ever done any shelterwood harvest, ongoing timber stand improvement work needs to be done. So as you can see up here, I've got 60 acres pasture for grass-fed beef. I run a few head of beef. We've got 100 acres enrolled in CRP and 240 acres in managed woodland. Some of it's in managed forest law, which is a Wisconsin program. It encourages landowners to have a program, and then some of it is just managed in a plan that I put together, an adaptive management plan. We've also been pretty heavily involved in the last, really since the late 80s when we quit dairy farming, and some of the programs, the EQIP projects that you can sign up for over here. So after all those years of this being really a very heavily worked farm, it's now more of a legacy and conservation property. but we're still caring for that land in a very intensive and intimate way. Our CSP projects, pollinator habitat, tree and shrub, ongoing projects, one project after another, trails and roads, habitat, and gosh, I don't even have hunting and fishing up there, do I? You would think that a guy who's known for hunting and fishing would have some of that up there. Honestly, the most important part of our farm is the conservation end of it to me. So, where I live in southwest Wisconsin is 30 miles from Elder Leopold's shack, and you might have heard of Elder Leopold. If you haven't, there's an organization over there you should go and talk to. But Elder Leopold wrote a book called the Sand County Almanac, and as a kid in high school, I read that book, and it really mattered to me. And I learned about conservation, really philosophy from that. And some of the things that Leopold said that have really stuck with me are up here. We abuse land because we see it as a commodity. I knew I couldn't do it for too long. We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we begin to use it with love and respect. So one of the things about our relationship with the land, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity. So these are really, conservation type mantras. And I happen to come up with the one that was talked about before, it's not ours, it's just our turn. And I realized that one day when we were doing some of that work, that I had the good fortune of the work that was done previous to me and the planning that was done previous to me. And as we were planning and doing work on our farm and in our woodland, I realized that it was important for me to be thinking about the future as well. Another one that oftentimes doesn't get pointed out, but as a private landowner is real important to me, is that conservation will ultimately boil down to rewarding the private landowner who conserves the public interest. I get a lot of questions about accessing our farm and pursuing the public's game. And I certainly can understand that that game belongs to the public, but the land does not. And then the last thing that has really spoken to me in recent years is there are two things that interest me: the relation of people to each other and the relation of people to the land. And that was one of the last things that Elder Leopold wrote. He died of a heart attack fighting a fire when he was 61 years old. I'm 63 now. And when I think about Leopold dying at age 61, I'm thinking, man, I have not gotten very much done in my 63 years compared to that cat. But let's think about that for a minute. There are two things that interest me: the relations of people to each other and the relation of people to the land. If you're familiar with Leopold, you'll know that he developed the whole idea of a land ethic. Philosophy, developing your own conservation philosophy is a really important place to start. What I've figured out is that now that I understand my own conservation philosophy, it's not ours, it's just our turn, that every decision I make about our property is a lot easier because that's the thing that I'm focused on. Doesn't mean that I'm not interested in revenue, doesn't mean that I'm not interested in hunting or planting crops or taking trees off of it or any of that kind of thing. But I'm thinking about with the action that I'm taking, what was done in the past, what I'm doing in the present, and how that affects the future. So, the relation of people to each other and the relation of people to the land. The folks over in the corner over there, the public access folks, Land Tawney, who was just up here, my friend Ryan Callahan was just up here. There's an organization called Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And keep public land in public hands, very much a public access group. But we've also are working cooperatively on opportunities on private land. Because if conservation is going to be done in an area like ours, like here, east of the Rockies, where the majority of the land, in my area, 95% of the land is privately owned. So if you're going to do something about conservation in the area, I'm in an area you may have heard of, southwest Wisconsin, Richland County, we got a hell of a deer population. We also got a little problem, it's called chronic wasting disease. And we're sort of first in the nation of having it running through the whitetail. So if you're going to do anything about chronic wasting disease, you're sure as heck going to involve the landowners. If you're going to do anything about habitat on a larger scale, you better involve the landowners. You need to have the landowners involved with conservation. So what's so interesting to me about where these things start to come together is that access is one of the biggest issues facing sportsmen today. Look who's saying this, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. I know that Howard, who was up here before, is another, and the folks from TRCP would have said the same thing. Said to be the #1 reason that lapsed hunters and anglers cite when asked why they no longer participate in hunting and fishing. I have this friend named Steve, and when I first met him, he grew up in Michigan, and he said he used to spend 90% of his time securing places to hunt and 10% of his time hunting. You know, looking for permission, doing what he could to do that. First time he came and hunted with me, he goes, his first words out of his mouth was, I don't know if you've ever heard him like on a podcast or television show, but he likes to say, "Hey man," a lot. First thing he said to me was, "Hey man, is there anything I can do to help you out around here?" And he was there as a guest of mine by invitation. But that told me a lot right there, that here's a guy who's interested in the work that it takes to have a piece of property like that. We've continued to be friends ever since. So you're probably all familiar with these private land access programs that are public. We have one in Wisconsin too called VPA. Got the Nebraska walk-in program, correct me when I'm wrong, Kansas. Over there is Iowa, and down there is South Dakota. Tried to educate myself about what kind of access programs you have here. Well, those walk-in programs are pretty interesting to me. I understand what the landowner gets. They get paid. I understand what the access seeker gets. They get the opportunity to hunt on land, essentially treating it like public land. But the question that I have is, what does the land get out of that? Well, we know that the HIP program, there's some opportunity for that. But I'm wondering, I know what the landowner is putting into their property generally and how they're working with their property, but I'm wondering what that access seeker is doing for that land that they're working on. So that's one way. In my area, this is a little bit more of how this works. So traditional private land access alternatives in our area, and you probably have all dealt with this a little bit in your area as well. One of them is permissions. So if you're a landowner, you've probably received letters from people looking for permission to hunt on your land. And it's an interesting thing, and actually I kind of blame it on Ranella and Meat Eater for talking about it a little bit on a podcast, and then all of a sudden I started receiving these letters because they could go on to a mapping program like Onyx and find, they touch it and Onyx tells you who owns that land and what their address is. So then I started getting these form letters, and they'd all sign them. But again, if you're like me and you're a landowner, I also get like 2 or 3 of those from realty companies every week also. And that's not the way you're going to convince me to let you have the opportunity to access my land. Next one is to know someone, which is a really great way of doing it, right? And the reason for that is if you know somebody, you have a relationship with them, there's a trust involved. At least there should be. At least you hope there is. Family or friends, owning land. Big one that started to happen more and more in our area, there's a little county north of us called Buffalo County where they kill big giant bucks all the time. Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Richland County, Wisconsin kills more big giant bucks than they do in Buffalo County. We just don't talk about it publicly. And I just lost points with the guys from my county. But leasing, right? And I'll tell you a little secret about the Duren farm. Last year, 40 people hunted and accessed our farm for different reasons. 4 of them paid. They paid for, I have 4 bow hunters who paid for 12 days of hunting on our farm. And they pay, they get to choose what 12 days it is that they're gonna hunt. They get the first choice of them. And they, without going into details, pay enough to pay the property taxes. And my brothers and sisters who are my partners on the farm are really happy about that. After they're gone, I start opening the property up to other people who don't pay a dime. And these guys who pay it, they've been doing this now for 6 years, and so we don't get this straight. So we pay X amount of dollars to come here and bow hunt. And then we leave on Sunday, and Monday afternoon, you got some guy who comes in here and he doesn't pay you anything. You got it. It's a real simple concept, you know. You're like, well, wait a minute. And they realize that like the second year, we're about to start the 6th year of doing it. They come to our place for they've done great with their hunting. They've all killed, they've all killed deer, they've all killed some really nice bucks, but they come for an experience that they're having at our place as well, as do the other folks. So, the last one is become a landowner. And I have said it to people, I was like, yeah, well, it's my place. So, my rules, my friend Pat Durkin, outdoor writer, calls me the captain, and he says there's 2 rules. Doug is the captain, and the captain is always right. So whatever I am interested in doing, he's like, he follows whatever it is that I would like him to do. And I think as landowners that we have that opportunity, we have that right. But there's this fellow who's a hero of mine, Elder Leopold, who I've looked to for inspiration on a lot of things, a lot of conservation issues, a lot of just thought process and that sort of thing. So I don't know, I'm sure you've all heard of Elder Leopold, but how many of you have heard of the Riley Game Cooperative, other than when I just flashed this screen up, the shot up here on the screen? So Eldo at this point, or I should say Mr. Leopold at this point, was a professor at the University of Wisconsin. And he had gone from working mostly in public lands out west to starting the first wildlife ecology position at the University of Wisconsin. They made the position for him. So he's thinking about private land and private land conservation because of where he was in Wisconsin, where most of the land, 95% of the land in my area is privately owned. If I haven't said that before, I'll say it again. 95% of the land is privately owned. So Leopold in the 1930s is out tooling around. He goes to this little area. If you've ever been to this part of Wisconsin, it looks like your river bottoms and your nice pheasant habitat around here, grasslands, and he's out looking for a place to hunt. He was a pheasant hunter. And so he runs into this old farmer, Reuben Paulson, and he starts talking with him, and Reuben says, I talk about letting you hunt here, but there aren't many pheasants around. And, it's because we got all these poachers, these trespassers that come in, and they just take them whenever. And Leopold looked around and he goes, well, that might be true, but your habitat isn't very good. You could do some things to improve your habitat. So what Leopold proposed in that very day was that he and his buddies would come out there and work on that land and improve it for habitat in exchange for the opportunity to hunt it. And part of that exchange was not only doing work and raising pheasants and dropping them, but it was also marking the boundaries. I'll put that one up. Members supplied sign to mark the boundaries of the cooperative. Well, you know what those signs said? Game cooperative, no trespassing. So they were controlling their property. And as a landowner, quite honestly, it's very important to me to be able to control who's on my land and why they're on there. The days of open access are for especially landowners like myself, and I'm sure many of you, where you have an intimate relationship with your property, that it's personal, that just anybody coming and going is not something you'd be particularly interested in. So, if you just kind of go down through this, it's like, wow, it's kind of a nice idea. It'd be great if I had some kind of folks around who would do that. Well, conservation of private land, 60% of the land in the United States is privately owned. These numbers are really kind of staggering when you start to look at them. So we're all kind of acknowledging this, that the land use has changed. A quarter of the land is primarily or leased for hunting. I was talking to some folks from out here. I was listening to them tell me about some of the landowners who are buying it, and they're buying it for, and this is great. I mean, this is just fine, right? People are buying it for for hunting. They're also putting crops on it. They're doing CRP. They're doing all that, and then they're doing most of the work on it. But one of the things that we're also running into is that access seekers, people who want to hunt, people who want to recreate, people who want to forage, people who want to be out there with nature, are having trouble, especially in areas where there's a high amount of private land. They're having trouble with gaining that access. What I figured out in my years now, as I said, a couple years older than Leopold, 63 years, is that I'm getting I don't get as much done in a day as I used to. I'm still trying to, but it's not working. So land stewardship requires a portfolio of planning, labor, skills, and knowledge. It's with this spirit that we've started this initiative, and we're proving the concept on my farm in southwest Wisconsin. And that is of cooperative access, sharing the land. Foundational pillars really come to this. We've got people. Remember what Leopold said about the relationship between people and the land? People, land, and then having land ethic. And again, if you know anything about Leopold, he talked a lot about the land ethic. Don't get me wrong, incentive programs are great, and I've got a lot of land in incentive programs. But what I've gotten to also is, and then the land has to be financially viable, but I've also gotten to a point where I want to do the right thing for that land, quote unquote right thing. We all have to figure out what that is. So we're trying to connect people with the land and each other, developing a conservation ethic. One of the things that I would like people who don't own land, and maybe who aren't farmers and who aren't hunters or access seekers in any big way, to realize from this opportunity is if that they go out and they get on a property, that they learn what it takes to own a piece of property and the work that goes into it, and that they're willing to contribute to that, and that they're willing to be supportive of things like the Farm Bill. Because as we all know, farmers make up a very small percentage of the population, and hunters and anglers make up a little bigger percentage of the population. We're talking about 10% at most, and 90% of the rest of the population, and 90% plus, are also paying the taxes that are helping with all of these programs and these kind of opportunities, so we want them to support conservation. A conservation ethic is important. Community, building a lasting support system. People coming and going on my land, if they're paying, the guys who I have a 6-year relationship with, part of what they also do now is they're also doing work for me. They happen to be plumbers, so there's always something for a plumber to do around an old farmhouse. But building a lasting support system, diversity, people just come, there's different people coming and going on a regular basis, which is going to work in some situations, who are paying for access in one way or another. That's going to work in some situations. And this is just another one of the opportunities. The advocacy part of that's me throwing in there, wanting to advocate for ongoing conservation and farm programs, and so that we can have support for the things that we love. So here's an example. Again, our proof of concept, and as you as landowners to ask yourself, is this something for me? So I have a management plan in place, very active management plan. Like here in our area, if you don't, it's very highly manipulated land. And so no management is an option for a plan. It's just not a very good one. You have to have a management plan in place if you really want to have an ongoing conservation property. Conservation management practices and general property care needs. So we've got this management plan. I'm a very active landowner. I'm a very engaged landowner. And if you're an active and engaged landowner trying to get things done on your property, this would be one of the things that you would, one of the reasons that you should consider this. We've got these practices that need to get done. I'm interested in people who are interested in conservation. It's kind of an important thing to be thinking about. And the other part of it is, I come to things like Pheasant Fest and talk about conservation and hopefully educate people a little bit about it. It's just a part of who I am and what I want to do. It's not for every landowner, it's not for every access seeker. But if you like can identify with any of these ideas, it's something that you should consider. willingness to connect with with others in their land through sharing access for hunting, foraging, and recreational activities. The community and conservation issues. Again, the issues are so important. So here's our example. I don't know if you're going to be able to see all that stuff up here, but this is an intake form that we use. And I didn't want to use any of the people who are working with, the landowners who are working with now, so I'll put mine up there. Getting invited to hunt on the Duren farm is kind of like getting Green Bay Packer season tickets. There's a really long list of people because pretty much on a daily basis, because of my work with Meat Eater and my big mouth, I get a lot of requests for it. And so when people contact me through social media or whatever, and even the people who do send letters or emails, I'll keep their name and I let them know, look, it's sort of like Green Bay Packet season tickets. I'm number, I think, 1,205 or something on that list right now. I'll never get Packer season tickets. But the opportunity comes up from time to time. Every year, I have at least 2 to 4 new folks who access my property. So really, the intake form is pretty straightforward. And if you were a landowner who signed up for this, your information would be kept confidential until the point where you would be interested in connecting with one of the access cooperators. The number of acres, tillable, the different, just kind of a description of the property, the kind of game that's there, the management plan, just so people understand what's going on. Labor opportunities, what people can contribute, and such, and then what I have set up, what I have available right now. I mean, the other stuff is really tied up, and actually all of turkey season this year are tied up as well. I'll probably be up to about 45 people hunting the farm this year. Anyway, and then some of the other part of it is exchange expectations. And really, I lay it right out. If you're going to come and hunt on my place, it's kind of in this case, it's sort of a one-to-one or 1-to-2 exchange. And every landowner can decide for themselves what they would expect from somebody in terms of work and the kind of work that they're able to do. One of the guys from Pheasants Forever is one of my cooperators. Funny thing, right? Met him a few years ago, and he was at he actually just stopped by the farm, contacted me, and said, hey, I'm going to be in the area, how about I stop by? So he did, and he looked at the windows. He goes, I can replace those windows for you. So that's one of the projects that we got done versus hiring a contractor to do it. So it kind of depends. I mean, what kind of skill level people have and those sort of things. So if you're interested in more actively managing your land, ask yourself that question. Do you need help with implementing these management practices and other projects? Are you willing to trade land access? Sharing the land will connect you with people who are able to do that. So this is just a blackboard in the old farmhouse on our place that has a few of the projects that I'm going to be expecting my cooperators to help with. Some timber stand improvement, both pine limbing and thinning, and some hardwood TSI, invasives control. And I'll go out there with them, I kind of get them started. Sometimes I'm working with them a whole bunch. And sometimes I'm just kind of leaning up against the Can-Am talking to them too while they're all working, but you got to have some of that too. At some point, it's just become the kind of the grumpy old man. We still got some house windows to take care of, a little fence repair, this kind of stuff, and my cooperators get this. And they're looking at it and go, hey man, I can come out and help you with this project or that project. These are things that I kind of specialize in and that I'm particularly good at. One of the things that people have been particularly interested in is helping me with the CWD kiosk and the dumpster work. And that kind of shows a certain commitment to me about our concern about our deer herd and the future of our deer herd. Turns out one kid who came out is a mechanic with an implement dealer a little ways away, but very well versed in, he comes and changes oil and stuff like that for me and equipment. So if you're interested in this, what we assist you with is assessing your property needs and opportunities, your management plan. If you're a landowner, you're sitting there thinking about it, we help you, and this is accessible, we help you put together a cooperating land profile, and then we help with the connection of we do a lot of the sorting for you. So you don't have to go through like a whole bunch of resumes, but we'll get to the access seekers in a minute. Question that we get a lot about is, well, what about liability? It's actually a written agreement between the people, and it states what's going to be done and what they're going to get exchanged for that. There's a hold harmless agreement that's a part of it, and then we have some suggestions about insurance. So I say insurance usually, so I try not to sound like that. Anyway, access and liability agreements, understanding what your insurance needs are, and I will tell you that additional liability, first of all, you probably have liability insurance on your property already. Additional liability insurance is not expensive. I've got an additional $1 million umbrella for $350. Anyway, we match landowners with a catalog of access seekers, so we do some of that work with you, for you. For access seekers, we're providing that opportunity for folks to connect with like-minded people in that community where they can build conservation, hunting, and other skills. That's pretty straightforward. That's the right button. So what we help the access seeker or the access cooperator do is to build a conservation resume. And if you're somebody who's looking for a place to hunt, whether this is something that you get involved with or not, build a conservation resume. Here's my name, here's who I am, here's what I know how to do, here's the contribution that I've made to conservation, here's some particular skills I have, here's organizations that I've been part of. Oh, and if you went to something like the fire school at the Aldo Leopold Foundation near me, that's kind of an important thing. I've gone through chainsaw safety class at the Aldo Leopold Foundation, or UW Extension or wherever, any of those kinds of things. And this is a tip, even if you don't become part of something like this, if you want to meet landowners, you need to go where landowners are. And it's often a lot of these landowner days where landowners are learning about different conservation projects that they should be doing on your land. But so the conservation resume is a particularly important tool, and we have them up on our website, and you can fill it in, and it ends up coming to us, and again, all your information is kept confidential. Some of the things that people have been accessing, not only on our farm, but on others, hunting and fishing, obviously, foraging, nice morel mushrooms over there, but man, I have learned so much about mushrooms from some of my access seekers that I've got like 6 different kinds of mushrooms on the farm, and I will tell you what, morels being one of them. So the other 4 of them were really good. Pheasant backs, they're cool to pick and everything, but unless you're making mushroom soup, they aren't particularly good. So this is what we're helping them with. One of the things that I've promised my cooperators on my farm, and in fact now one of them is actually the R3, the Learn to Hunt coordinator for our local BHA chapter, is that if you need a place to take a new hunter and you are one of my cooperators, you can bring them here. So, if you have questions, we can talk about them now. To learn more about it, you can go on our website. That QR code will actually bring it up and come over by our booth over there. Then you want to talk about anything else, that'd be great. Any questions? Man, you're going to have to yell or somebody's supposed to be here with a microphone. Oh, here he comes. Sorry. I hit it right at 12:45 or 45 minutes. Give a few minutes for.
When you transition from agriculture to more conservation land use, what type of invasive plants are you dealing with over there?
That's a good question. The kind of plants that the things that I'm dealing with. We actually dealt with, in the pastures, particularly multiflora rose, autumn olive, honeysuckle, garlic mustard. Tell me when to stop. When we transitioned our cropland from cropland to CRP in 1988, we've done pretty well with most of that. Because of some financial concerns, it was in for 20 years. Then we came out for 6 years. And when CRP first happened, at least in our area, it was all smooth brome that you planted, which was like, seemed like a good idea at the time, I guess. But, and so now, then we went back in during the, tell me, 08, CRP prices were down, commodity prices were way up. It was a financial viability thing, so we went back into production for 6 years, 100 acres. I mean, it was a substantial difference. And also there were some issues at that point with changes in property taxes. But yeah, the smooth brome kind of kept everything else out, including wildlife and pollinators and all kinds of other things. We went back into production when we came out. Yeah, we've got a pretty good seed bank there. Goldenrod being the biggest one that we battle. Cool season grasses. I did do on the 100 acres. I have 20 acres, 21 acres, 3 strips that are prairie, and that's done pretty well. We've done fire management and cutting management in there, but the other stuff where it was where we just planted a back into clover, alfalfa, orchard grass, CP. What CP is that? CP1, and that has not done as well. But part of what I do, because I have the beef, is every 3 years you can cut and mow and bale, and I do that on a rotational basis through the property. So every year I'm getting some of that CRP hay, so that's helped quite a bit. But that's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. Next, young lady there in the middle.
So I have 2 questions. My first question is there a geographical boundary to where this program applies in terms of the states, so that's question number 1. And then question number 2 is, you mentioned the catalog and your ability to help through this program for landowners with those wanting to access. Does that catalog work in reverse for those wanting to access to find landowners that are part of the program?
Wow, those are 2 really good questions. So geographically, right now, yes, it's mostly southwest Wisconsin. Part of the reason I was invited to come here to Pheasant Fest, besides my devilish good looks and whatnot, was that they wanted me to talk about this program that we've been working on. In 3 years ago, I think it was, in Schaumburg, I actually introduced the idea there because of what we were doing. Talked about the Riley Game Cooperative. So proof of concept, southwest Wisconsin mostly right now, but it's simple enough, quite honestly. It's simple enough to do it anywhere. If there was a landowner who popped up out here in the 4-state area who said, I'm interested in doing this, we can work with them to put people together. I can tell you this, folks, that there's a lot of interest on the access seeker side, and there is more. I was a little concerned when we first started talking about it with landowners in southwest Wisconsin, that I was like, well, what's it going to be, like 90% access seekers and 10% landowners? And it's really been about a 60-40 mix, that 40% of landowners are interested. Small parcels up to bigger parcels as well. Most of them are very engaged landowners. So the way the program works, we'll give you all the tools that you need to be able to do it in your area, and we can do that. We will do that sorting. So, so there's 15 access seekers in, outside of Omaha who are interested, and there's a piece of land that there's a landowner who's interested in this out there as well. So the short answer is, depending on what that landowner is looking for, we would try to match them. So give them, okay, we've got 15,
All right, good afternoon and welcome.
here are the first 5. Take a look at them and see how you feel about that. And if you want to talk with any of them, then we'll give you their information and them your information. So we hold on to that until it gets to a point where, okay, there's a real interest. In reverse, right now it's been mostly a one-way street where because there's been way more access seekers than people who are than landowners. But it's been, I was really gratified with the response from landowners. Anybody else?
So is there a,
He's going to give me the microphone. I can't hear a damn thing.
so is there a fee or I mean, you charge to put these things together?
There's got to be some money involved.
Well, that's what I'm trying to
That's
get
what
to the
you're
bottom
getting
line.
at. Yeah. At this point, we are not charging a membership fee. We have sponsors who are willing to support us. We are thinking about a membership fee, and here's why. It adds value to it. Part of what the sponsors would like to do is to help fund us in a way that they can also grow their base of users. Onyx, First Light Clothing, the ones that are all kind of associated with Meteor, giving not just discounts, but Onyx, one of the things that Onyx is interested in doing is giving us the actual one-year membership for anybody who signs up, which is a $25 to $50 value. So it's a real return on it. We've talked with First Light, see you guys with First Light shirts out there. And they're interested in doing the same, not just we'll give you a discount of whatever amount, we'll actually gift you a gift card of, 25 or 50 or whatever. And so our goal is if we do charge a fee for this, that the return will be, from the sponsors will be more than the value of the cost of the membership. We'd like it to be a zero sum, is what it comes down to. I'm 63 years old. I don't have to be doing this, and but at the same time, it has to have there has to be a base for it to be able to work, and money money makes the world go around. So right now we have not signed up with an NGO like Pheasants Forever. The Leopold Foundation is particularly interested in working with us on it. And so we'll see what direction that goes. As I said, this is proof of concept right now. We know it works. We've kind of run into most of the issues, like the liability issues. What if somebody gets hurt? Well, hell, if somebody gets hurt on your land, whether it's through one of the other access programs, there's still a legitimate liability concern. We mitigate that as much as we can. Any other questions? Because I got 6 minutes yet.
What kind of advice do you get on food for your animal?
My county is a great example. 95% of the county is privately owned. 85% of it is deer habitat. Like our farm, a mix of ag and we grow a lot of deer. And even though we have this disease raging through it because of the nature of CWD, we still have a very big herd, but it's the herd is getting younger because it takes 2 years to kill them. So I work with the Department of Natural Resources on deer management. and work with one of their professionals there, and our regional biologist, and they're very available. But in terms of like food plots and stuff like that, in my area, the amount of agriculture it is, planting food plots, as far as I'm concerned, is like taking sand to the beach. And bait and mineral is illegal because of chronic wasting disease. So I work a lot more on habitat. And I'm a member of the Deer Management Assistant Program that the DNR has as well. And full disclosure, I'm in the site and land management, contracting and consulting, mostly consulting business now. So I'll help people put a plan together, and then that's something that they can implement. But there's plenty of those services that are out there for free, mostly through the Department of Natural Resources. Last one. How far does your mushroom pickers come from? And I was wondering what your nearest town is and how big it is. Nearest town? Yes, to where your farmhouse is. Yep. Well, the nearest town, and it's this metropolis that I'm sure you've all heard of, is Cazenovia, Wisconsin. No, I guess not. If you were to look at, am I doing that the right way? Wisconsin, southwest Wisconsin, or should it be like that? I can't. This way? All right. So here's Madison, here's La Crosse. I'm halfway in between. I'm about 60 miles, a little over an hour from Madison, and a little over an hour from La Crosse. Baraboo is nearby, right on the Wisconsin River. Reedsburg, Richland Center, Cazenovia. I live in Cazenovia where I grew up. You told me 40 years ago that I would move back there. It's not even gonna happen. But 325 people. And I've got a lot of dear friends there, and I have a lot of dear friends in the area as well. But my access seekers, my cooperators, those nearly 40 people now, come from somewhere from near and some are from quite a ways away. Furthest one currently is from Vashon Island, Washington. She's actually my assistant as well. So it's a real mix of people, right? So I've got a group of 5 people who are very nearby. And like I could call one of them right now and say, hey man, you go by the farm and make sure my cattle aren't out because I'm not there. And I don't have to make that call. He knew I was coming out here, so I'll check in on the farm for you. So he's driving by once a day and just, putzing around, and he's got full access to the farm. He can go out and walk around in the woods, and he's probably out shed hunting right now, But I went by and checked on the cattle, right? They're doing a little shed hunting too. The mushroom hunting is pretty interesting. When my father died 5 years ago at age 92, but last time he went morel hunting with me, he was 90 years old. And man, I remember going morel hunting with him when I was a kid, he was my hunting mentor in so many different ways, my conservation mentor, really. When he got to the point where he liked morels, but he got to a point he couldn't really get out that much anymore. He goes, it's all right if you and your buddies go out there and you look for morels, but remember, I got to get my percentage. And I'd always ask him, well, how much is that? He said, well, you bring them in and I'll decide what that percentage is. And I miss him dearly, but that was, that was a part of the attitude. My dad was really probably the reason more than anybody that I'm interested in this, because he was a cooperative hunter. He was an old school deer hunter. Those guys, they hunted together because they had to. That was the only way you got deer, was by pushing them, driving them, or mooching them, if you know what that is. Growing up on the farm, or growing up with the farm, which I guess is the last thing I'll tell you. I actually grew up in town. We lived in town, and the farm was 2 miles outside of town, so I rode that 2 miles an awful lot. We had a guy and his family who milked the cows. We did all the other work, and we gave him every other weekend off. And the school, where I went to school, Western High School, is out in the country, went right by the farm. And so I grew up with a farm, not on a farm, and the difference there was that when I got on the bus in the morning, I didn't smell like cow manure like a lot of those other kids did. And I didn't appreciate that for a very long time. And now none of those farms they're just not there anymore. And anyway, that idea of having other people enjoy the fruits of the bounty of our property is really something that's come down through the generations. I think I just went over a minute. I wondered what he was going like this. Thank you all very much for coming and listening. And if you'd like to talk more, I'll be over there.